Welcome back to another edition of Political Breakfast, heard right here on WABE. I'm Lisa Rayam, and with me here today are Republican strategist Brian Robinson and Democratic strategist Tharon Johnson. We're all here today as we tape on this Monday morning, and we want to welcome you, and I want to welcome them. Hello to both of you.
Hey, good morning.
Hey, Lisa. I want to start off by saying, is it just me or is climate change real? I mean, just when I decide to go into my spring to summer closet, pull out my shorts, I'm in my quarter zips. I even had a jacket on this weekend and one morning. And so, I think if we don't think climate change is real, it's definitely real because we're in May and it's literally 40 plus degrees, 50 below, 50 and low 50s and high 40s when we wake up in the morning. Just crazy.
Yeah, Al Gore was really onto something, wasn't he?
Sure
Well,
was.
I think this is the opposite of what Al Gore was calling it, but it's lovely.
Whose dog is that back there?
That's my corgi. Her mom is getting. Her
I saw the
up.
news. So y'all in South Georgia brought a new dog home?
No, that was the anniversary of our Gotcha Day, or whatever they call it. So we got Keely a year ago over the weekend.
Okay.
Yeah, so she's been with us for 1 year.
All right. Well, B-Rob
She's
loved the
destroyed.
kids and B-Rob loved the dogs. All right.
Yeah.
Well, she has destroyed my house.
Yeah. Well, we certainly have a lot of politics to talk about, but first we got to talk about our Hawks. I applaud them. They did the best they could, and hey, there's always next year, right?
This is Atlanta. There's
Well, I want
always
to start off
next
by
year.
saying,
We
Lisa,
say
look,
that quite a bit, don't we?
well, but congratulations to the Hawks. We cannot let this season be a total failure. It definitely had some wins. I'm very optimistic as a season ticket holder for next year. And we did make the playoffs. I think moving on from Trae Young still was the right decision. Trae goes on with his life. We now rebuild a younger, more athletic team. But it was just a brutal beatdown in the game 6. That's the thing that it just doesn't sit well with me. Not so much that they lost to the better team, obviously. But, I mean, we were down by 50 going into halftime. I mean, so that was the embarrassing thing. But we'll bounce back, and the Hawks will be okay.
Yeah, I turned it off after the second quarter. I think we were down 30 at the beginning, and I was like, this is not going to have a happy ending.
Yeah, I got better things to do. Yeah. Hey, look, strong close of the season. I definitely think there was a huge upward trajectory after Trae Young left. Hopefully that means something for the future. I'm not smart enough about basketball to know, but look, the early exit from the playoffs is a tradition. Traditions are important in the South.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, last night I got a text. There was going to be an emergency call protecting voting rights, and got on that call, and Stacey Abrams was one of the panelists on there. There were about 7,000 to 8,000 women on this Zoom call, and it was streaming on YouTube as well, talking about the Supreme Court's recent decision regarding voting rights. And it's a sad day for many people, and it's being felt all around the country, especially with these special sessions being called quickly to realign the districts. There's a lot going on here, and reminiscent of the civil rights era for a lot of us.
I have a very different view on it. And, we heard these same things in 2013 when the Supreme Court struck down Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which was long overdue and something that I had actually worked on as a staffer in Congress during the 2006 renewal of the Voting Rights Act. We kept saying, you cannot have this emergency power where the federal government comes in and tells states what they can do as far as redrawing district lines, what they can do as far as voting laws, what they can do even down to the level of where can you have a precinct set up. That's what we had in Georgia from 1965 basically until 2013, federal control of every element of our elections. Now, we needed that for a period of time because voting rights were being oppressed. Human rights were being denied. Those voices were being quelched, the voices of American citizens. That had to be changed. We needed an overwhelming response. Now, at some juncture, we no longer needed an overwhelming response, but we had all of this infrastructure built around this. And it became a way for Democrats to scare their base and to get them to donate and get them to turn out. And I will point out that we have not had this catastrophe for voting rights in America in the last 13 years post Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. And I will say, it's going to be the same coming out of this ruling. We are not going to see a major change as far as access to the polls. Everyone's rights are going to be preserved. You can still sue if there is some voting rights violation. What this has to do with is federal mandates on states about how they draw districts. Districts that were being forced to be considerations of race. We can't have that going forward forever. There always had to be a timeline and an ending to this, and we have gotten there. We're no longer a country that's 90+% white with a oppressed black population in a portion of the country. We're a multicultural nation, and the demographics have changed. Our voting rights need to evolve and change with it.
Lisa, my quick response to that is that B-Rob is correct. I'm going to go in reverse to his comments. Number one, he's right. We are a multicultural society. We are not 90% white anymore in this country, but we are 50+% white. And when you look at this decision, I want to break it down for a couple angles. Number one, this notion that we as a nation have evolved past the need for protection of the Voting Rights Act is at best widely naive, and is at worst in concerted effort to actively dilute the political power and influence of diverse communities, and more importantly, the people within it. You know, again, white voters make up 50% of this nation, which in every way, how you slice it, no matter how you do it, right? So if you don't think the Voting Rights Act of 1965 is the answer, then let's focus on what it is. And therein lies the question, Lisa, what is it? Because to be clear, if it's not making us go back to 1964 again before the Voting Rights Act happened in 1965, then what is the sense of urgency? Why now? Look at what's happening in Florida. Governor DeSantis just introduced a clearly deliberate, racially motivated, politically motivated gerrymandering map. You saw southern states run to actually try to redraw the maps for political purposes. The second thing I want to break down is this. You hear all these Republicans every single year come out and talk about how great Dr. Martin Luther King was, how great John Lewis was, and even most recently, how great David Scott was. They compliment them when it's convenient and it's a ceremonial moment. But for you to sit up here and then come back and say that I think that, and not you, bro, I'm just saying in general, I don't want you to feel like I'm attacking you because you didn't attack me. So I want to make sure we say that for our listeners. But for these Republicans who have come out, and if you fit that category, to say that we don't need this anymore and we need to actually support this decision out of the Supreme Court, then you are going against one of the main things, if not the most important item, the agenda, the movement that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. fought for, and that is the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So you can't have it both ways. And lastly, I'll say this. What do we do about it, Lisa? You know, you asked the question. You have all these meetings, 8,000, 9,000 women. First and foremost, I'm going to do something that I think the Republicans don't do enough of. I want to thank every single woman who actually got on that call, because you all are reminded as women, Lisa, and not just black women, but white women in this country, Asian women, Hispanic women who were here back in the early 50s and 60s. You all were also discriminated on by a white male-led majority of people who did not want you to vote. So I want you to tell everyone, and if I could have been on that call, this is what I would have said to them. The calls are great. Let's get educated. Let's figure out what's going on. But let me tell you what the other side is doing on their calls. And they've been doing it for a long time. They're not doing no more calls. There's no more paralysis of the analysis. They are laser-like focused to try to win. They want more seats, and they are utilizing the executive branch and the judicial branch of the federal government to try to achieve this goal. So how do we stop it? You got to elect more Democrats. You got to elect more people who are going to fight back on this deliberate attack on our voting powers by eliminating the Voting Rights Act. Power is in numbers, so we can't continue to act nice about it. We can't continue to remind these Republicans just about the history of this country. They don't care anymore. You got to elect more Democrats, elect the right Democrats. We got to elect more judges. We got to have more lawyers get involved, and we got to fight, and we got to fight, and we got to fight. And so while I will commend, as I close, the governor of Georgia, Kemp, having the sense, as my mama would say, to not tamper with 2026 and like other states that are doing that. But the fight continues, and we better get ready for this special session that I think will happen. And we can't go in there playing nice. We can't go in there just reminding people of how we got here. We got to give people a reason to rally and to act.
With Governor Kemp saying, let's not do anything in 2026, how is this, though, filtering down through the Republican Party, Brian? I don't know if you have a feel for that, but if you do, give us some insight.
Well, we get some of it from Governor Kemp. But his viewpoint is just one of the viewpoints. There are some that want to put the pedal to the metal right here in 2026. What Governor Kemp seems to be saying is that's not really feasible, and 2028 is the time to do it because the federal courts have now said that drawing districts based on race, and of course we've been forced to draw districts based on race all these years, is now not constitutional. So it would require some re-look at it. And I think you will see a special session at some juncture this year to take a look at how we comply with those court orders. One thing I want to point out is there's only so much engineering that can be done. There are many Democrat voters in Georgia, and they have to be put somewhere in one of these districts. And this will spread those voters out some and spread their influence out some in so doing, and sort of could change the face of Georgia politics in some ways. So I also want to point out that Democrats do the same thing because they don't have, particularly in states like the Northeast where you still have a largely white population. There are Republicans up there. We see Republicans get elected governor in some of those states, but all the congressional delegations are all Democrat. That's because Democrats use their line drawing powers to draw Democrat districts. And so what you see here is removing a mandate, a regulation on certain states, and allowing them to take the same partisan approach as many Democrat states already do.
So then, Tharon, here in Georgia, the main focus now would be the midterm elections?
Absolutely. And just to go deeper here, so let's move from what has happened to now how do we kind of move forward. So yeah, it's the midterm elections. And the ruling, just to emphasize this, is that got to remind people, this all started in Texas, where the Republicans, in a very, again, deliberate way, redrew districts. And yes, B-Rob is right. You did see people in blue states like Virginia and California and other places threaten to redistrict. Now you see Florida coming back and other southern states. And so now it's all about the midterm elections and who will turn out and who do you vote in to represent you in Congress. Now, here's the threat to Georgia. And let's just go ahead and put it out there, Lisa. We know that we have some districts in Georgia, which, by the way, Democrats have not been in power for over 2 decades. So when we were in power, did we draw politically advantaged districts that we gerrymander? Absolutely. But here's the difference, Lisa. We actually followed the Voting Rights Act. Okay, we didn't try to destroy it. And at that time, 24 years ago, or maybe like 26 years ago when it happened. So now, 26 years later, there has been a deliberate attack to eliminate Section 5, which is gone, and now eliminate Section 2. So now the midterms are more important because the question that Democrats have got to ask themselves is this one of the defining issues that's going to drive turnout for us to win in November? And I believe the answer to that question is yes. You have a very unpopular president right now who is not even necessarily getting the blame on this. And you have judges that are ruling in favor. Of course, there will be lawsuits. So, yes, Lisa, it's all about the midterms in 2026. I do believe that the Democrats will take back the House. The Senate is a whole nother conversation. But is this a defining issue that will motivate moderates, independents, and Democrats to vote for Democrats? I think it's a part of that coalition building. But it goes back to what you started off this conversation with. What can we do? And the first step was those 8,000 plus women getting on the call. Again, thank you guys for doing that. But now it's got to be followed up with legal action and political action.
And I'll say, if you look at this case got started in Louisiana, and they drew a second black district there, and that's what the state had challenged. because they were told they had to draw that second district. Now, what does that mean as far as balance of power in Congress? It means a second Democratic district. And so that's part of what Democrats are so focused on here, is that Louisiana will now lose that Democrat seat. They'll be drawn in a way that a Republican is elected. So it's, people want to make it about race when a lot of it's really about partisanship. And what we're doing here moving forward is sort of treating everybody the same and moving beyond just identity politics. Raphael Warnock is testament to the fact that white voters will vote for a black candidate that they like, that they think will represent them and their values. We've got some black candidates running for governor of Georgia as Democrats. I think everyone would say they are legitimate contenders and can win. They can build a multiracial coalition that would lead them to victory. And I would say if a Republican is elected governor in 2026 in Georgia, they too will have built a multiracial coalition of victory, because that's how you have to win in Georgia. We're now a majority minority state with a teeny tiny white majority in the electorate. So building that multiracial coalition is a very important part of America's future, and having mandates that require carve-outs in the long run is counterproductive.
Well, let's talk about the midterm election and specifically the governor's race. There's a new AJC poll out showing on the Democratic side, Keisha Lance Bottoms has a commanding lead over the other contenders. Just want to get some thoughts on that. We've been hearing that, and polling changes from week to week, but she's steady and strong. Tharon?
So, Lisa, we got to get this in full context. And so there's been a series of independent polls that have been released since the last time we talked about this. Our listeners have heard a lot about the Republican polls, and B-Rob has done a really good job of kind of explaining those polls. I think he would agree that there was an insider advantage poll. Then there was also an AJC poll in the Republican race where he did a really good job of kind of explaining what he's seeing on the inside and how that is being sort of displayed on the outside with the independent poll. So what I'm about to do is go into these two polls, but also tell you for what I'm hearing on the inside. So the poll that you're referring to right now, Lisa, shows that Keisha Lance Bottoms right now is at 39%. Michael Thurman is at 10%. Jeff Duncan is at 7%, and Jason Estevez is at 8%. But there's one number that really is interesting in this poll. You still have 35% of the people in the electorate who are undecided. There was an insider advantage poll that came out earlier last week, which I immediately looked at the crosstabs, and B-Rob knew I pointed this out. It showed Keisha Lance Bottoms being over 50%. It actually showed Michael Thurman higher. He was in the mid-teens, I think closer to 16%. And Jason Estevez and Jeff Duncan was in the low single digits. And so that poll didn't necessarily do what this poll did, which is the AJC poll. The Inside Advantage poll had a less number of Democrats that they interviewed, whereas the AJC poll had a larger number of Democrats that they interviewed. And these are quote-unquote likely voters. And what we don't know is that how many of those people who were polled, Lisa, on April 27th through April 29th, that Tuesday through Thursday early voting, who had actually already voted, who are going to vote. Now that I got all the scientific data out of the way, let me tell you where I think the race is at. One thing that hasn't changed since I've been talking about this race on Political Breakfast now for let's just say for the last 6 months, is that Keisha Lance Bottoms is in first place, partly because of her name recognition, partly because of people knowing her record, whether you like it or not, and she's got some favorability in different pockets of the electorate. The other thing that's been true, and y'all got to give me credit on this, is that every single poll, maybe except one, has showed that the only person who has a pathway to force a runoff between them and Keisha Lance Bottoms is Michael Thurman. And as much as people try to spin it, as much as people try to talk about different things that are happening, what has been consistent is that whether it's 800 people, 1,000 people, or less than 800, he is in second place. Now, if the data stays the way that it is, and he's able to actually spend the resources, continue to build a coalition, cut into her support in Metro, and strengthen his support around the rural areas, I think we will possibly see a runoff between him and Keisha. Now, here's the it factor, and this is what's got to happen in the last 2 weeks. The person who has spent the most money, the person who is actually probably running the most full comprehensive campaign, and who is currently, based on this AJC poll, has some momentum, has passed Duncan, is Estevez. And so at a time where we thought Duncan was the one that was surging a couple weeks ago, it shows that the early money spent by Estevez is actually paying off. So now he has actually jumped to that third spot. So the question is now, Lisa, can Estevez actually pass Thurman? And with Thurman only being ahead of him in this poll by 2%. Jeff Duncan now is at 7%. So where would the undecideds go? Lastly, and I'll close, Jeff Duncan still has a lane as well. For him to be at 7%, it shows that I think that his support is pretty much flattening out. I think he has pretty much gotten most people when they're polled, hey, I'm with this guy. Can he grow his numbers? Because what this poll showed is that Jeff Duncan polls the best with independents. Michael Thurman polls the best with moderates, and that Jason Estevez actually is polling better with liberals. What's remarkable about Keisha Lance Bottoms' number is that she's getting enough from all of those pockets of voters, and she's doing well in metro and doing better than some people expected in the rural areas. But I think she has pretty much hit her ceiling, Lisa. So let's just say that she stays at that 38 to 40%. Can Jason, Jeff, and Mike, and Derek, and Olu, and Amanda have enough collective votes to force her to go into a runoff? And the last thing I would say is this. If you're Keisha Lance Bottoms' campaign, and I know her people on her campaign very well, you're looking at these numbers because you got to go with your internals. If they believe that they can win this without a runoff, trust me, Lisa, they're going to do their best to do it. But the risk with that is that if you blow all of your money and you don't actually win without a runoff, then you go into the runoff with not as much money as what your opponents are going to have. But B-Rob will back me up on this. In order for either Jeff, Mike, or Jason to make the runoff as well, they're going to be in debt. That there's no way they go into it without money. So everybody's going to be broke if there's a runoff, and then they'll have to recoup. But if Keisha Lance Bottoms can keep up the momentum and the others are not able to break in with the undecideds, she could do it. I don't think that there's enough momentum there on the numbers I'm seeing now for her to beat out 6 other people who are running. I think those 6 other people will pull from different spots of Georgia, and that's why I believe it will actually go to a June 16th runoff.
Yeah, she's definitely spending money, though. Over the weekend, I got a campaign booklet from
16 pages magazine, baby.
Oh, my gosh. It was impressive. It really was. I was like, a campaign booklet. That's interesting. On the Republican side, Jackson and Jones in a dead heat, says the headline from The Hill, in Georgia's gubernatorial race. Brian, any thoughts on that? Rick Jackson in a pretty good spot heading into the midterms.
Well, heading into the primary, yes. And look, one thing that we are seeing in the Republican polling and in the Democrat polling is some wide variations, but with some common themes. And sometimes the variations are such that they really leave you scratching your head. You know, we have this AJC poll for the Democrats showing Keisha with a big lead, but in the high 30s. And then Insider Advantage, Matt Towery's outfit, was touting a poll over the weekend that had her winning without a runoff at 52%. Now, somebody's not right. Now, that's a pretty big spread between those two numbers. And maybe they are compiling this differently. Maybe one of them is including leaners and another one isn't. I don't know what the methodologies are. Maybe Tharon's dug into those. I have not. But, you know, we're getting a mishmash of numbers, and it's just a soup at this juncture. I don't know how accurate any of this polling is, other than showing broad, big picture directions. Obviously, Keisha Lance Bottoms, for example, is going to finish first. And the big picture indicators suggest that Mike Thurman seems to be the most likely to finish second in that primary. On the Republican side, we've seen Rick Jackson with a fairly sizable lead for some time. And, you know, we've seen Burt Jones begin to spend at really, really big levels, over $30 million. And where we have seen that have an impact is it's, you know, come after Rick Jackson's lead a little bit. But one thing it hasn't done is raise Burt Jones's numbers. This, again, is a mishmash, very much conflicting numbers. The AJC poll had Chris Carr at 3% and Brad Raffensperger down below 15%. And then the Insider Advantage polls had both of them in double digits. I mean, again, somebody's not right, but I'm not sure who at this juncture. You know, one thing that we are seeing consistently, if you add up Carr and Raffensperger, that number is getting somewhat close to where Burt Jones is. So I think the question at this juncture is how far ahead of Burt Jones is Rick Jackson? And I don't know that these public polls are telling us, but what we can surmise is that Rick Jackson is ahead. And again, I always have to disclose that I am a consultant for the Jackson campaign.
Yeah, well, with time winding down, what do you all predict the mood and the atmosphere is going to be like on both sides?
One of the things that I think people love about Political Breakfast is that we get into the numbers, right? And these numbers are fluid. So if you check one website, which is, I'll quote Georgia Votes, it's saying roughly about 221,000 people have voted so far. The question is that how many of those people are actually Democrats? And we know that Democrats, when we all went to sleep on Friday night, with voting over, of last week, all of last week, we know that roughly about 50% of the people who actually came out to vote were Democrats. So let's just say that if there's roughly 121,000 Democrats that have voted, you have about 1.25 million eligible Democrats that are still likely to vote in this, meaning these are people who, like me, vote in every single primary or have at least voted in the last 2 out of the 3 primary voters. So that means we voted in 22, we voted in 18, we voted in 14. So I haven't voted yet, but I'm not undecided. I know who I'm going to vote for. I just got to, hold out and make sure that I do it at the time that's most convenient for me. And I think a lot of voters are like me on the Democratic side. I think the other thing that's happening, Lisa, is that when people say they're undecided, they're like, okay, you know what? I'm not really convinced that Keisha Lance Bottoms can win in November, but I want to see if Jason, Jeff, or Mike emerges. If you're undecided, you're probably just like, you know what? I really like Mike. I like his experience. I think Jason has got a lot of excitement and energy. And yeah, I want to learn a little bit more about Jeff Duncan. Can he utilize his experience to get the middle independence? So I think a lot of people who have probably said, okay, we're not going to vote for Keisha, but we're looking at the other 3. And then lastly, I think the other group of voters, Lisa, honestly, is that life is happening. The economy is messed up. Gas prices are high. Cost of living is high. People are worried about, where their kids are going to go to school, what they're going to do for the summer. So I think they're going to prioritize this race in the last week of early voting and on Election Day. The reason I give you those numbers is that if this sustains itself, if this early vote number where we're outvoting Republicans, which it will close, but if we continue to outvote them at this pace, then I think that's good news for everybody other than Keisha, meaning that the other 6 people have got to be able to get some of those undecideds. But if it stays with the traditional track, and if we're about 50-50 on early voting and then with a huge surge on Election Day, therein lies the opportunity for Keisha Lance Bottoms, based on a 2022 model, that she feels that she can really push harder, to your point about mailing and TV and all that stuff. And by the way, just to be fair to her, she did get the endorsement of former President Joe Biden.
Yeah, we forgot to mention that. Right.
Yeah, a lot of people think that cuts both ways. It definitely helps with some folks, but some folks like, nope, he's the reason why we got Trump again. He's the reason why Kamala didn't have enough time to run. Thurman put out Andy Young, which he, was announced. He put out a video with him. Jason Estevez has gotten a long list of endorsements from different organizations. There's so many I can't name, but he's put that out as well. So you'll start to see more endorsements, more media, and more. I think there will be some attacks here pretty soon. I just don't know who it's coming from and who it's going to be aimed at.
Yeah. Brian, you said you're pretty calm here today.
Sorry,
The status quo.
No, I am here in the final weeks of the primary with a bunch of candidates who are clients on the ballot. So
right.
Staying focused is very difficult. The workload never ends. I was sitting at my desk till midnight Sunday night, trying to catch up on my work before the madness begins on Monday morning. So here we are. And so what you just see is the shell shock look on my face. That's what Tharon's dying his head because he's been here. He knows what this is like. And I'll say this is where we are. We're in the silly season. And the silly season is a dangerous time. It is a unnerving time for those who are candidates and those who are advisors. A lot of lies get thrown around because people know that there's not enough time to rebut them. I do think some of that's built in with the electorate, though. They tend to quit listening to campaigns and to buzz around campaigns around this time. that's why I'm a little dubious about how much these polls are showing undecideds. The people have pretty much have locked in by now. If they're not locked in, then they're not going to go vote. At least not unless they're not locked in at the top of the ticket. I believe it if people are undecided about stuff down ballot. I'm a very informed voter, as you would imagine. I went in to vote early on Friday, and I admit there was a race or two that I wasn't prepared for, and I didn't know the names. And I'm sitting there thinking, what do I do? I want to call a friend, like on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And the poll watchers are like watching you like hawks because it's early voting, and
That's a good thing.
and you're the only person in there. So I had like 5 eyes on me, like I was trying to rob the place.
Couldn't Google or anything, could
Yeah,
you?
That's why you got to take that sample ballot in, which that's what we do on the Democratic
I know.
side.
Right.
That's what I
We
should
give
have
people
done.
sample ballots
that
and
sample
slates.
ballot.
It's called slates. You give them a slate of people to vote for.
Yes, and so the irony is I had done that for my wife. I had because there were a couple of races I knew she wasn't familiar with some of the candidates, and I was, because I had met some of these folks. And even then, I dropped the ball. So, sure, you may be undecided on who you're going to vote for in the PSC race in that primary. That's fine. But if you're undecided about the governor's race, then you really are you haven't been paying attention, and you're probably not going to go vote because, look, there's a lot going on right now. I don't know about y'all, but I've got numerous graduation parties for friends' kids, for my family's kids,
It's the busy season
all this
and the
stuff
silly
going on,
season
all this
combined,
into school stuff
right?
for my daughter. My God! And then you squeeze in a primary, all of this.
My 82-year-old mom, and she always gets a little upset when I tell her age. I want to amplify what B. Rob just said, right? I was at home with her in Athens, went home Sunday night, spent about 4 hours with her, took her grandboy. So when she finally decided to pay me some attention and not Tatum and Tyson, we went over her sample ballot. And B. Rob is right. I mean, my mom, whose son talks and eats and lives this every single day, she watches all these shows. There was only 2 races that she was, had her mind made up that she was going to vote for. It was the mayor's race in Athens, and it was the governor's race. And B. Rob, you'll be happy to know this. You know who she asked about? Well, it was interesting. She likes that Houston game. She said he's a nice little attractive, attractive guy, right? And told me a lot about his father, which I didn't know, who had done a lot there. But to B. Rob's point, Lisa, after that, going through that dang ballot, I mean, all these questions, all these candidates. And so trying to tell my mom,
you have to study
like, hey,
before
this
you
is
go
such
in
and
there.
such. So what I end up doing is pulling out my phone and going to everybody's website. And then here's the kicker, though. I show her a picture, and she's like, oh, yeah, I remember him. I saw his commercial. Oh, yeah, Miracle Rankin, standing with that white woman. What's her name? Jen Jordan. Like, so even my mom, who is a super voter, she's going this week, she has to study this. And once you show her the pictures and you show her the website and you say things, and then Brian, you'll be happy to know. She asked me a question. She said, have you ever met Rick Jackson? I said, well, Mama, glad you asked. I said, I've met him a few times. I said, but I was just with him last week. And she said, well, what was he talking about? I said, Mama, he gave a nice story in front of the Georgia Chamber. I said, Brian was there. And I said, honestly, I thought the story was very compelling to this audience of people. He really let go. And it was a day after the debate. And then she said, well, what are you all? She said, what does a Republican running for governor talk to you about when y'all are talking? I said, Mama, honestly, I said, we were talking about when we met and, he complimented me. And so at least I'm going to your question about how I say he's a good man. You told me you get those questions, right? And he remembered what he told me years ago, and that is, hey, I don't always agree with you on what you say, but he was like, you say it in a very sensible way. And he said, you're one of the few that actually can, do it that way. And then, of course, I asked him how he was doing, how he was going on the trail. And then Lisa, more importantly, I thanked him for putting up with Brian Robinson. I said, God is going to bless you, Rick Jackson, for putting up with Brian Robinson. And he looked at me and put his hands on my shoulder. And guess what he said, Lisa? He said, someone had to do it. I said, thank you.
Someone had to do it.
There'll be crowns in heaven for him for his patience.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have a lot to talk about next week as well. I thank you so much for checking in and chiming in about, a lot of things that are sensitive to Georgia voters right now. So thank you, as always, for your perspective. And y'all have a good week working, doing what you do. We'll check back next week.
See you next week, guys.
Thank you.